And my mother, working in this thrift store, she would price books at the thrift store. And then she'd come home with a sack of books. And she'd say, well, how can you not buy a good book for 15 cents? And so though she was supposed to be selling these books, I grew up around so many books, but one time she took me to the library in Wedgwood, and in the juvenile science fiction section, I found Rocket Ship Galileo, and that was my entree to science fiction, and I just loved it. And I think it inspires your creativity and your ability to think out of the box and think that wild and crazy ideas are possible.
Hi, and welcome to GeekWire from GeekWire.com in Seattle. I'm Todd Bishop.
And I'm Kurt Schlosser.
Kurt, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Todd. Nice to be here again.
So I asked you to come into the office to talk about a feel-good story this week. You know, there's been so much news lately, obviously, in the world writ large that's hard to deal with. And even just this past week, there's been a lot of tumultuous stuff happening on the Microsoft campus that I've been able to cover. And I'll link to all that from the show notes. But suffice to say that I wrote a headline this morning saying that protesters denied planting listening devices in the Microsoft president's office, just to give you a sense for how crazy things got this week. So you can check all that out on GeekWire. But there was one story in particular that was followed up by a commentary by you, Kurt, that I think just deserves kind of relishing for a moment here on this podcast. And that was the creation by Paul Allen's estate, the estate of the late Microsoft co-founder, of a new fund. It's the Fund for Science and Technology. It's starting with a $3.1 billion endowment. And the idea is really to bet big, to make these bold bets on future innovations in the environment, in biosciences, and in artificial intelligence for good. And it's really part of this long-term legacy of Paul Allen, who's kind of the other Microsoft co-founder in a lot of people's eyes. You know, he's obviously not as well known as Bill Gates, but in many ways, he's had an even bigger impact, especially in the Seattle region, his hometown where he grew up. And Kurt, you wrote about this in a piece, and I was really struck by the opening of your piece because you started with this story of a sticker that you found in a restroom at a bar. Tell us that story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm kind of a sticker freak, I guess. I notice them. I don't do any stickering, but it's a popular pastime here in Seattle. It's a form of sort of graffiti, if you will, tagging only in sticker form, and in certain bar bathrooms around Seattle, there are quite a few stickers on stalls, mirrors, you name it. It's just a thing, and I notice them. Sometimes I take pictures of them. Sometimes I peel them off and I keep them. I peeled one off a few weeks ago that says, "Billionaires are the reason everything sucks." And I think, in the wake of Elon Musk and everything he was doing with the Trump administration, I sort of got the sentiment. I was like, okay, yeah, billionaires, they can suck. There's 3,000 billionaires in the world. And I thought for a second about some of them who tend to make news more than others, and some of them suck. But in the wake of this news that you reported about Paul Allen and the estate, I returned to that sticker, which was stuck inside my wallet for a few weeks, and I started to think about it. Did Paul Allen suck? I don't think, in light of a lot of things that Seattle has benefited from, that he did. And I wanted to sort of touch on that, and that's what the piece got at through the sticker as a lead.
Yeah, I thought it was a great personal anecdote that really shed a light on this larger issue. And I loved that you said that this sticker deserves an asterisk for Paul Allen.
Yeah. And like you said, Bill Gates is a local billionaire. Jeff Bezos used to be, and he got a lot of grief also with stickers.
He used to be a local, still a billionaire.
Oh yeah, used to be local. Now he's a Miami billionaire. Melinda French Gates, Mackenzie Scott, both local billionaires, doing wonderful things with their billions.
Who might deserve asterisks of their own.
Right. This sticker, if you apply it to Paul Allen, I did say I think it needs an asterisk. And then I went on to explain why that might be and what Seattle has reaped in the wake of his death and even before his death.
So just to let folks in on what this episode's really going to be, what Kurt and I are doing here is we're setting up an interview that we're going to be playing later on with none other than Paul Allen. I was very fortunate back in 2011, right after GeekWire got started, to be able to interview Paul Allen at Town Hall Seattle. It's one of the most memorable nights of my life. And it is just a window into the mindset that I think is still playing out. And you got a chance to see that this week in the creation of this new fund, where it wasn't just a interpretation or a guess at what Paul Allen wanted to do. From talking with Linda Stewart, who is the CEO of the Fund for Science and Technology, it's clear that this is a direct implementation of what Paul Allen wanted, this idea of making these big foundational bets in the environment, in biosciences, and in artificial intelligence. And you see this as well with the Allen Institute, the biosciences-related Allen Institutes, doing everything from brain science to other forms of biology, to the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, which is commonly known as AI2, which just had one of the biggest months in its history with some big federal projects and all sorts of other things that they're doing in the realm of open source AI. And all of these things were outgrowths of Paul Allen's wealth, but more importantly, his brain and his philanthropy and his sense of using all of those resources and the privilege that he amassed during his lifetime for long-term good in the world. And it's just amazing to me that you're still seeing it play out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that what makes it interesting from my beat, my sort of normal beat, geek life, is that I've covered so much of what he did and what he did with his money as it relates to cultural touchstones in the city as well, beyond the science and the tech and his Microsoft past. You know, think about what he brought to the city with sports by saving the Seahawks, or what he did with the Museum of Pop Culture by building that music and science fiction institution at Seattle Center. The Cinerama Theater is well known as a project of Paul's. The Living Computers Museum, which is no longer here, but for a long time was a very geeky institution that he spearheaded and filled with rare computer artifacts. These are all things that mean a lot to the city and have meant a lot and are still here because he had the foresight to build them or rehab them or what have you.
It's really interesting because Paul Allen during his lifetime got criticized a lot for just being all over the place. And now in hindsight, you can see where a lot of these projects that you're mentioning were more passion projects. The Living Computers Museum, the Experience Music Project, which became MoPop, the Museum of Popular Culture, and all sorts of things like the sports teams, the Seahawks and the Trailblazers. And what you're seeing now is the boiling down of his interests, his platform, and his estate, ultimately, into the stuff that really matters for society and the world. And I know that the folks at his estate have been criticized for the amount of time that it's taken, and I think there's a lot of questions about where it's going to end up. But in this announcement, I think you're seeing really Paul Allen's vision come to the forefront. And not to mention things like the yachts, like all those things have been divested, or many of those things have been divested in recent years. And that then is funding and providing the endowment for this fund for science and technology. And you're seeing the initial wave of investments. They're going to invest about $500 million at least over the next 4 years. And the initial $15 million of that is going to several very well-known Seattle institutions to maintain projects that might not otherwise get the kind of grant funding they need. Organizations including the Ben Arroyo Research Institute, the University of Washington College of the Environment, the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, and Seattle Children's. They're all getting this funding, a piece of the $15 million in initial funding, to do things that might not otherwise be able to keep going. And I think there you're seeing this really interesting impact from Paul Allen. And then just one other thing, the sports teams, those are still out there. You've got the state still owning the Portland Trailblazers, but they just reached a deal to sell that basketball team in Portland for more than $4 billion, reportedly. And you've also got out there the Seahawks. You know, every Seattle sports fan's favorite question, who's going to own the Seahawks eventually? And that will eventually get sold. And the big question is how much of that money will go from the estate into this fund. And from what I've heard from talking with some insiders, it's going to be a big portion of it. A big portion of those future proceeds are going to go into this fund to make these long-term bets on science, the environment, biosciences, artificial intelligence. And in that way, it's just remarkable, this long-term impact that he's going to have.
And I like the impact is felt so tangibly here in Seattle.
Yeah.
It's a very unique prospect for a billionaire to leave their stamp on their hometown like this. You know, and you mentioned the football teams. It's like every time the hint of a sale might be coming up, we try to put together a list of who might buy them. And Bezos is automatically in there, and then some other rich people, and then it doesn't pan out for a little while, and it goes away. And Paul was that guy who actually did become the buyer, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, and he and Gates have their names on schools, and they've poured a ton of money into the University of Washington and so forth. But Bill's focus was more worldwide. He's solving disease and poverty and educational problems around the world with his foundation. I just think that when you look at what Paul has touched in Seattle and what we're able to experience on a daily basis, sure, some of those things have national and international implications and reach a broader population than just Seattle. But there are things here that are felt daily.
Yeah, and you make a great point there because, you know, one of the things we didn't mention was the University of Washington and the Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. To your point, one of the things that the fund is going to do is eventually go beyond Seattle, and they're not going to be putting that $3.1 billion endowment and future increases in that endowment entirely in Seattle. But they are starting here, and I think that was really important to them. And one of the things that Dr. Stewart, Linda Stewart, mentioned to me, the CEO of the fund, was that they want to create more collaboration among the different mainstay research institutions here. It happens to some extent already, but one of the things they can do with this funding is create these kind of unifying projects and look for ways that different organizations in this fund's portfolio, and it's a nonprofit, but in their portfolio of giving can work together and collaborate on things. By the way, Paul Allen not only directed the subject matter of this fund, he also picked the board members before he died in 2018. And they include former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer, Alan Jones, the former Allen Institute CEO, Dr. Thomas Daniel, who is an Allen Institute board member and the outgoing CEO of the Washington Research Foundation, and Nancy Peretzman, who's a longtime investment advisor at Allen & Company. Lots of different Allens unrelated in this story. So that really gives you a sense for just how deeply he was thinking about this and how purposeful he was in setting this up as his long-term legacy. And I don't even think he thought of it as his legacy as much as he thought of it as the right thing to do for the world with the fortune that he had amassed. All right, Kurt, well, thanks for coming in for this intro. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I will play for you excerpts from the 2011 interview that I did with Paul Allen at Town Hall Seattle. And I think it's going to give you some insights into the way his brain worked, from Microsoft to philanthropy to sports. But also, I think it might give you some inspiration. You know, listening back to this for me, it was inspiring to remember what his mindset was and how he approached the world. So we'll do that when we come back. You're listening to GeekWire, and we will be right back. Welcome back. It's Todd Bishop from GeekWire. And with the announcement this week of the new Fund for Science and Technology, a $3.1 billion foundation created by the estate of the late Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, I thought it would be fun and enlightening in a new way to take a time warp back to 2011, when I was lucky to get to interview Paul Allen in front of a full house at Town Hall Seattle. This was after the release of his memoir, the book Idea Man. He talked about his long-term view on science and technology and his philanthropic work, And I think you'll hear in his answers the thinking that would eventually inspire the direction of the new fund, with its focus on bioscience, the environment, and AI for good. More broadly, Paul Allen talked about the state of Microsoft at the time. He talked about jamming on guitar with the likes of Bono and Mick Jagger. And I even got him to talk very reluctantly on his part, as you'll hear, about his yachts and his submarine. Now, for historical context, keep two things in mind here. First, Paul Allen was well known in Seattle at the time as the owner of the Seahawks, the NFL team. And second, there had been weeks of reports at the time leading up to the release of the book, including on 60 Minutes, about what Paul Allen had written in the book about Bill Gates, including an account of overhearing Steve Ballmer and Gates talking about diluting his equity in Microsoft. This was back when he was recovering from his first bout with cancer. With that, let's jump in.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Paul, I want to thank you for doing this with us tonight, for being here, and welcome home to Seattle.
Thanks. It's great to be in front of a local crowd. Thanks, everybody.
I'd like to start with a question that I know is on the minds of almost every person in this room, particularly given the events of the past few weeks. And Paul, it involves a relationship that I know is very important to you. It's a relationship that's had many ups and downs over the years, many triumphs and challenges, and currently faces an uncertain future. So I just want to get this question out of the way right off the bat. Is Matt Hasselbeck coming back to the Hawks next year? Well, you were thinking something else?
That's a very good question, but obviously we're kind of in no man's land in the labor dispute right now. So when that's over, I'm sure we'll talk to Matt and his agent again. But there's nothing resolved at this point.
That's great. I didn't actually expect a serious answer to that. I hope.
I thought this was supposed to be serious.
I hope there's some sports reporters in the audience that got that. Paul, at the end of Idea Man, you described the book as one of the hardest things that you've done in your life, which is actually a pretty remarkable statement. What did you learn about yourself through the process of writing this book?
Well, it was an interesting process. I'd always intended to do a book at some point, just going through my career in technology and the amazing spectrum of opportunities I've had and things I've been able to pursue. But when I got sick in October, November of 2009, I just it was time to do it because I wasn't sure I'd be able to finish it. So I would working on the book, I would get up each day and try to get down some of my thoughts, and it helped me get the process of doing that helped me get through each day and was stimulated my brain but when you do something like this, there's a real revisiting of both the ups and downs of your life, and there's definitely some peak moments and some moments of where things happened that weren't necessarily what you hoped for, or were tough, or you had to make tough decisions. And so some of those moments, when you revisit them, and especially you go back over them over and over again, because another thing that happened is my background in computer programming in a certain way was re-energized in terms of the editing of the book. I edited every word in the book 8 times. And I remember that I'm kind of a stickler for exactness. And so when you go over those tough moments, after 8 times, you just don't want to do it much more. But it was very rewarding. It was very rewarding to do it.
What is the message that you hope people come away with about your life and the general impression that they have about you after reading this book?
Well, I'm someone that I basically get very, very excited about the creative process and creating things and having ideas. And when you see those ideas realized, it's just a wonderfully rewarding thing. So obviously being fortunate to be involved in the birth of Microsoft, and then recently things like the Brain Institute, those are amazingly rewarding things that that carry on a certain legacy that I'm very proud of. And then, of course, there's parts where things are more challenging and you make mistakes. And so I hope people, when they read the book, can take away some lessons from my mistakes and ups and downs over the years too. But basically, I hope they get a sense of me as a person who's creative, and then maybe you can think about creative possibilities in your own life based on what's in the book.
Yeah. Has your candor about Bill Gates in the book jeopardized your longtime friendship with him?
I don't think so, but I'm sure there are things in the book that Bill wants to discuss, and he'll have a different slant about them. And Bill and I have had many intense discussions over the years, and we haven't had a chance to talk about the book since it was published. I gave him a copy months ahead of publication, so we'd have a head start on it. So that discussion will be a very, very intense, and he'll be very direct, and as will I.
Do you think you'll be able to move on from that?
Oh yeah. Obviously, we've gone through so many things, over the years, and my departure, his leaving Microsoft, retiring. I mean, he's chairman of Microsoft. His retirement. So many different things over the years. We've both tried to help each out in different ways over the years too, as I talk about in the book when he came to visit me when I was sick.
I would imagine that his primary complaint won't be accuracy, but will be the question of why. Why did you feel it was important to tell those stories about him? What will you tell him if he asks you that?
Well, I mean, there's certain things that happened that were key moments in my life, the reasons that I left Microsoft, and I felt like I wouldn't be doing justice to my own story if I didn't tell them the way they happened.
Yeah. You travel the globe, and yet much of your focus is on the Pacific Northwest in terms of your investment in the community, real estate philanthropy, sports, and in fact, you explain in the book that you prefer local investments and that type of focus because you can see the impact. What does this place in the world mean to you, the Pacific Northwest?
Well, it's home. I mean, this is home, and my mother worked in a philanthropic thrift store, pricing books. When I was growing up, we've always enjoyed the arts here and the environment, wanting to give back and help people. So when I first started talking about ways we could give back with my sister, we overwhelmingly felt that a local focus was super important. So that was our very initial focus in philanthropy, and I hope that some of the things like the work with the Brain Institute and some of that research, because by nature it has a global impact, helping scientists all over the world with their research. That we're doing things that have global impact as well.
Yeah. You recently went through a second bout with cancer. Mm-hmm. And you write in the book that your illness the second time has made you simultaneously more patient and less patient. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, I think you're more patient because you realize that whenever you go through one of these treatment regimens, there are many things that are completely out of your control, and you just have to be patient and hope things work out for the best, and be optimistic and take a positive attitude. On the other hand, you realize that if there isn't a positive outcome, your time may be limited, so it makes you that much more focused on realizing your dreams and hopes, because all of our times on this planet are limited. So it basically, you're hit over the head with that idea when these things happen, and it gives you an impetus to accelerate the things you really care about.
So how has it changed how you plan to approach the remainder of your life? Will we see new things in your life as a result of that experience?
No, I'm casting a wider net, and I'm trying to move forward some of these things like the Brain Institute and trying to make them more ambitious and more successful in their scope. Not just the Brain Institute, but other things that we're working on, and to try to realize those things more quickly. And certainly in technology, it's almost true that you can't move too quickly. But things like research on the brain, that takes decades. So you're trying to plan the course of an organization that's hopefully going to have an impact 10, 20, 30, 50 years in the future. So it's all those things. And of course, on another very important note, I mean, you realize, I realized when I was 30, and of course I realized again this time when I found out that I was unfortunately sick again, that the support you get from your family and friends is so key to getting through any of these kinds of illnesses.
You said you cast a wider net. I actually, that surprised me in part because I would almost expect you to rein the net in and focus it on more specific areas where you could have a deeper impact. Why not do that?
Oh, I think you do both. I think over the last few years there was a point where I was perhaps involved in too many things, and I talk about it a little bit in the book, and you focus down because at some point, if you spread yourself too thin, you're just not going to have enough impact. So you focus down, but then if you have resources but limited time to make things real, you say, okay, is there something I'm missing? Should I be doing more? And so there's so many areas. Global health initiatives. Recently, I contributed some money, our family contributed some money to support animal health in the third world, gave Washington State a very significant contribution to build a facility to do that in a great way, which Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates had also had given some funding previously. So you start looking and thinking about the things that you'd wanted to do for a long time, try to actualize those, and try to find a few key new things to add to your plate.
In that vein, about 2 years after this interview, Paul Allen started the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Seattle, better known as AI2, which has gone on to become a key player in the world of open source AI. Coming up next, Paul Allen's thoughts on what Microsoft was going through at the time. All right, continuing our time warp back to 2011, remember that Microsoft at the time was led by Steve Ballmer as CEO. The company had unveiled Microsoft Azure, its cloud computing platform, but it was still an also-ran to Amazon in the emerging cloud market at the time. AI was still mostly the stuff of sci-fi, and Microsoft had largely missed out on the smartphone revolution. The company's turnaround under Satya Nadella was still several years away. Let's pick it up from there with Paul Allen, the Microsoft co-founder.
You're also very candid in the book about your feelings about your analysis of present-day Microsoft. It's a great chapter in the book called Hellhounds, referring to the lineup of Facebook and Google and Apple and all the others that are eating Microsoft's lunch in some ways. If you were still around as Chief Technology Officer, for example, what would you do? What would be your prescription for Microsoft today?
When these new platforms, the PC was a new platform, so when these new platforms come into existence, or come into existence in a very strong new way, whether it's the iPhone coming on the scene or the iPad coming on the scene, you have to recognize those and jump on the opportunity and be competitive as fast as you can. And I think I think Microsoft is trying its best to address those now, but they're trying to creep up on the and match the competition there that's already got a very strong presence in iPhone and Google's Android. So these new platforms are key, and you just can't. You have to have the agility. You can't miss the opportunity and let others own that opportunity. And so I think Microsoft is pulling out all the stops now, as far as I understand from talking to people there, to try to recapture those opportunities.
Yeah. So a bit of a litmus test here. Do you carry an iPhone, Windows Phone, Android, or BlackBerry?
Actually, I'm a little bit old school. I use a BlackBerry because my mother, God bless her, forced me to take touch typing when I was 16. So I got really fast thumbs on the BlackBerry keyboard. Not so much on and I send quite a few emails every day. But I'm sure at some point I'll convert to a new platform.
What might that? What might that new platform
I'm
be?
still evaluating. I'm looking at all the alternatives, and I think it's important, if you love technology, to try the different alternatives, to try the iPhone and the new Windows mobile phone is a great platform. So and Android. So I've tried them all, and they're all different. They're all interesting. But my whole thing is to try to imagine where technology is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, and see where how the chips that are in the products are developing, and see how that's going to influence things, and then see how the software that's coming along is going to influence the platforms. So I think it's fascinating. And this is kind of my, I don't know, I consider it my forte is trying to understand where things are going. And I don't think you can do that without trying all the different alternatives.
Okay. Mac, Windows, or Linux?
Windows, come on.
Really?
Sorry.
Star Wars, Star Trek, or Battlestar Galactica?
All.
No. All right. Okay, in another setting I would press on that, but I think you got some fans in the audience here. Okay. On the subject of science fiction, one of the things that you mentioned in the book is the inspiration that this book played in your life, rocket ship Galileo.
Right.
In fact, I was inspired to go find it on eBay as a result of your mention. It's about teenage boys who build a rocket in the desert and blast off to the moon. And the parallels to your own life are hard to miss. What did science fiction mean to you as a kid? How did it shape your life? And how's it still part of your life today?
Well, I still read a fair amount of science fiction just for fun. I think back in those days, the concepts of whether it's communication satellites or going to the moon. I mean, in the late 50s and 60s, we used to go. I went to Ravenna School in North Seattle. We used to wheel in a TV on a cart, and we'd watch the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo, launches in grade school. I guess by Apollo you're talking about actually about junior high and high school. But so there was that love of, space and space travel was in the air, and I'll never forget. My mother loved my parents. Both my parents loved books. My father worked at the University of Washington library as a top manager there, and so I grew up around books. And my mother, working in this thrift store, she would always say, and the problem was she would price books at the thrift store. So every day she'd say, and then she'd come home with a sack of books. And she'd say, well, how can you not buy a good book for 15 cents? And so though she was supposed to be selling these books, I grew up around so many books, but one time she took me to the library in Wedgwood, and I found in the juvenile science fiction section, I found Rocket Ship Galileo, and that was my entree to science fiction, and I just loved it. And I think it inspires your creativity and your ability to think out of the box and think that wild and crazy ideas are possible. And it just amazes me that I've been able to live and realize some of those wild and crazy ideas like Spaceship One.
You mentioned earlier the Allen Institute for Brain Science, and the potential impact of the Allen Institute may be hard for non-scientists to understand. Can you paint a picture for us of what the world will be like someday, how it will be different if the research that you're funding accomplishes what you hope?
Well, any brain research is a long-term. First, I'll say any brain research is a long-term project because it's so amazingly complex and so mysterious, and we're just starting to understand the outlines of how things work, I guess is how I would characterize it. So there's two different aspects to the question. One is understanding how the human brain, or any brain, the mouse brain is actually the brain that we did first, set of brains we did first. How do they work? How do they function? How do they react to their environment and learn and react in novel ways, process information? It's so completely different than the way a computer does. and it's in some of the program computers. That fascinates me. I mean, the brain is designed by evolution, so each part of it is optimized for what it does. And so it's incredibly complex. And I like to think recently about the idea of there's a complexity break that slows you down, because the minute you get into these things, you think, okay, I'm starting to understand this. Then you realize, oh, no, it's 10 or 100 times more complex to fully understand that thing, that aspect of the brain than you thought. So anyway, there's the whole set of things that has to do with understanding how the brain works. That's completely fascinating as a just because we all want to understand really how do our minds work, why are we who we are, all those amazing questions, and ultimately we'll arrive at some, decades from now we'll arrive at a much better understanding of that. Then there's, trying to understand basically at a chemical level, at a biologic level, how the different parts of the brain work, and if you understood that and those aspects of the medical aspects of the brain, then you could possibly bring forward treatments to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, which my mother suffers from. So you're very hopeful when you do these things, like we released our data on the mouse brain, which is an important experimental animal, and now our first set of human brains, that will bring forward and make happen earlier some possible treatments for those diseases.
How optimistic are you?
No, I'm very optimistic, and the approach we've taken is fairly unique, not completely unique, but it's like the Human Genome Project, where you're trying to put a database of information online that scientists around the world can access for free, and that will accelerate all of their research. So they don't have to say, okay, genetics of the human brain, I need to start slicing up some tissue and looking at that. But that data is already online, so they can say, okay, a gene that's related to Prozac, what parts of the brain are affected by Prozac? And then if you combine Prozac with something else, you have them, anyway, it can tell you many things, and it can potentially accelerate all of their research, so that to get to the core of the problem, so we really understand something, all these different scientists can benefit. And amazingly and rewardingly, it's become a standard tool for scientists to use that care about the genetics of the brain already.
Yeah. Speaking of the brain, let's talk about music for a second.
My band is here tonight too, but they're not playing, so just I want to be clear about that.
I saw them downstairs. They look like quite the group.
They are, but I won't get into that.
In the book, you write about the catharsis of playing music, and you talk about how you're on a good riff and your shoulders just sink in. What does music mean to you?
Well, I mean, music is another mysterious thing, but it's a form of expression. So you can play a chestnut of a blues tune, and yet when you play a solo on that, you can go to a creative place where you're just riffing in your own particular way with your own expression, and it's just a wonderful thing. And being able to, in the book I talk about meeting some of the amazing musicians I've been able to play with over time. Those experiences have, because I just consider myself a decent amateur guitar player. Some of these people are, there's a reason, a Mick Jagger or Bono or any of these people, they are extremely talented at what they do. I mean, amazing, and they can improvise, and I mean, it's an extremely creative process they go through and create their amazing works of art. So I just feel wonderful. It just feels wonderful to me to be able to jam with my band and play some songs, and then occasionally have these unbelievable experiences, whether it's just witnessing others create or actually very occasionally be able to play with them.
You tell this great story in the book about Bono convincing Mick Jagger to play Satisfaction, to sing Satisfaction as you play. Can you explain how Bono pulled that one off?
Well, he's a clever one, that Bono. Well, it was Mick. A friend of mine was throwing a birthday party for Mick, and I had brought a bunch of equipment that we could have kind of an improvised jam. And I asked Mick a couple times, Mick, you feel like playing? And Mick, he just didn't seem into it. So I go to Mono. I said, "Hi, Mono, I don't know what to do. Mick doesn't feel like playing, but it might be fun." He says, "I know what we'll do. I'll sing his song really slowly, and he'll have to sing it. I know he'll have to sing it." So we start playing Satisfaction, and Bono's singing it really slowly, and Mick starts to look nervous, like something has gone wrong in the universe. That's my song. This has to stop. So he went and grabbed the microphone, and he's singing Satisfaction, and I'm playing the main riff to Satisfaction, extremely nervously behind him. And then when the song was over, I look over at Bono, and Bono goes, "Told you." And so that was a fantastic little interlude there.
What's your favorite guitar?
Oh, I play what was Hendrix's favorite guitar is a Fender Stratocaster. It's an electric guitar, and it's not that easy to play. But if you can get your technique halfway decent, then you can make some amazing sounds and feedback and everything else come out of it. I was fortunate to see Jimmy play here in Seattle twice. I think he came 3 times. Once at Six Stadium, I think once at Key Arena, and those, my first concert actually was at Key Arena, and that was a mind-blowing experience for I guess I was 17, something like that. So that was from one. So I was another Seattleite. I was kind of at the feet of trying to learn, some of Jimmy's things. And for years, I would play along to records without any help, trying to, how the heck does he do that? And, so year after year, I would, slave away, because I probably as a teenager, at some point I thought, well, I could go into programming or music. Programming won, but I never stopped playing, and so I kept slowly shedding my way through Purple Haze year after year. And so after 25 years, I could play a half-decent Purple Haze. And it was funny to talk to his bass player, Noah Redding, and I'd say, what was it like? With Jimmy would come in, he'd say, he'd come in after, one night, and the next day he'd come in, he'd say, "Here's this song called The Wind Cries Mary, and, I wrote it in about half an hour, and here we go, let's record it." And I'm going it took me 25 years. 25 years. So.
A lot of engineers, actually, software engineers, are musicians. It's an interesting correlation. And there's other similarities too. You're sort of in a band of other programmers, and so in some ways you were part of one of the greatest bands ever. It was called Microsoft.
We had our hits. We did. So, few in the top 10 there, I think.
Yeah. Some of the audience questions focus on an interesting topic here for the local community, and that's South Lake Union, where Vulcan's development has completely transformed the neighborhood. It's been really remarkable, and then to see Amazon.com move in as the anchor tenant. And the question here from the audience is, after South Lake Union, what is yours and Vulcan's next real estate venture?
Well, that was pretty unique, because I was very excited to support the Seattle Commons Initiative and loan that initiative the money to acquire a lot of those parcels. And unfortunately it failed, and so the property came back to me, and we just felt there was a future in biotech and many other burgeoning areas to revitalize South Lake Union. And it's wonderful to have not only biotech and the University of Washington Medical School and Amazon and many others. That area of Seattle has really come to life and is doing well. So that's a very rewarding thing for us, and it's also obviously turned out to be a good investment. So a lot of times the best things you do in investing is have a good outcome where it's not just the investment, but there's also a benefit for the community, and I feel like that's what's happening in South Lake Union. And I'm happy that the Experience Music Project is down in that area too. That was an amazingly interesting and rewarding thing. We just opened our Nirvana exhibit recently, and
Come on, you can give it up for Nirvana. That's all right. Yeah.
So I love EMP. I mean, not everybody liked the architecture initially, but I hope it's grown on people. I don't know. I consider Frank Gehry to be one of the true original architectural geniuses, and my sister really pushed his selection, and she was right, and I kind of prodded him like guitar bodies, really swoopy and wonderful, and what an amazing job he did, I think.
Yeah. You actually mentioned probably the first love of your life in the book, Rita.
She's here tonight.
And I believe Rita's husband is sitting next to her. Tell us about Rita, Paul.
Well, there's obviously I talk about some of the wonderful times that Rita and I had in the book, and one funny incident, which I guess has gotten surprising amount of attention, but was unusual at the time. Rita cooked a very nice dinner of, I think it was baked chicken, and Bill attacked this chicken with a spoon. And after dinner, Rita came to me and said, "Can you believe he ate it with a spoon?" And I said, I was a little surprised too. But it was great chicken.
So you've stayed in touch?
We do, yeah. We have a meal a couple times a year, and it's wonderful to stay in contact with your old friends and acquaintances.
Tell us about your yachts.
They're too big and there are too many of them. What do I need to say anything else? No. I mean, I think that I grew up, seeing films like Silent World, which is a Jacques Cousteau movie about his wonderful diving saucer and all these adventures they had underwater. So, the biggest yacht that I have basically accommodates a submarine, and what these guys do, these captains, they'll say, "Paul, we know you want to build a bigger boat, and here's a model. It's about this big, and the submarine goes in the back here, and it's going to be pretty good sized, and then they start building it, and you go to Germany, you see it, and you go, oh my gosh, that's really big." No, it's enormous. And but we've been able to have adventures. We recently did a trip to Antarctica, which was fabulous. Although it's disappointing to see. It turns out that the poles are disproportionately affected by global warming. So the scientists are happy to show you, here's what the ice just in the bay that you're anchored in looked like 20 years ago, and here's how half of that ice is gone completely in 20 years. So for all those that say there is no effects of global warming, or it's just seasonal variation or whatever, you go to the poles, or you can fly over Mount Kilimanjaro or whatever, it's happening. It's happening. But anyway, we've had wonderful adventures on the yachts, and I love to scuba dive. And if you have the crazy success in some of these things that I've been fortunate to enjoy, you think about trying to realize some of those dreams, and I guess the yachts are one example of that. And then some of my friends, they just rent the yachts; they don't own them. So, but if you own them, they're a lot of fun, and I had great times on the yachts.
In the submarine?
Yeah, it gets really, it turns out if you go 1,000 feet down in the ocean, it's really dark. And the animals are really strange, but if you put on some Pink Floyd, it's fantastic.
Those were highlights from my 2011 interview with Paul Allen. In light of the announcement this week of the new Fund for Science and Technology, it's a $3.1 billion foundation created by the estate of the late Microsoft co-founder to fund breakthroughs in bioscience, the environment, and AI for good. Thanks to my colleague Kurt Schlosser for joining me in the first segment. I'll link to his commentary and the rest of our coverage from the show notes. Thank you for listening. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop. We'll be back next week with a new episode of the GeekWire podcast.